Hello and welcome to the JackCast, the Swansea City podcast on what is a marvellous evening because we are going to discuss probably one of the most memorable games in Swansea City history, at least one that surely will go down as one of the most memorable in Swansea City's history. With me, Guto Llewellyn, you have tonight Steve Carroll and Matt Barocco. How are you, boys?
Still coming down, I think, from what was a mad night, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Cloud9.
We still can't quite believe it, I don't think. I mean, I'll be honest, I think even in a couple of weeks when the dust is long settled, we'll still be wondering what on earth happened on that Wednesday night back in July. The last podcast that we recorded was recorded before the Bristol City match last weekend, which was our last home game of the season. We're not going to really discuss that because we've got more important things to get onto. But just to summarise for anybody who wasn't really aware somehow of what happened, the Swans did win against Bristol City, a deserved win, albeit with a slight bit of good fortune with Bristol City missing their penalty in the second half. The Swans holding on there for a valuable 1-0 win, which meant that it was still mathematically possible going into the final day to catch Cardiff City, who were 3 points ahead of the Swans, but playing against Hull City. And the day after the Bristol City match, Nottingham Forest dramatically lost to relegation-threatened Barnsley in the final minute of the game. Now, a point alone in that match for Nottingham Forest would have been enough to secure them a playoff spot. Of course, Barnsley's late win not only gave Barnsley a shot at survival, it also meant the Forest had to get something in their final game against Stoke. I say had to get something because in actual fact, they could have lost the match and still probably stayed up because we needed a 5-goal swing to catch Nottingham Forest. So going into the final day of the season, you had Swansea playing against Reading, you had Cardiff playing home against pretty much already relegated Hull, and you had Nottingham Forest playing at home against Stoke City, who had nothing to play. I repeat, for the Swans to get a playoff spot, they had to win at the very least and hope that either Cardiff lost by any scoreline to Hull, but only a defeat would have done in that game, or relied on Stoke to beat Forest and score enough goals in that game to help us with a swing with a goal difference. Now, before we get into discussing the games, Matt, we'll start with you. How hopeful were you before these matches that the Swans could actually scrape into that playoff spot?
I think if anyone is saying that they were hopeful it could happen, they're lying. And there's no two ways about it. I'm not even going to discuss it. It's absolutely fantasy. I was pleased in the sense that we got to the final day and mathematically something could happen, but nobody thought it would. Of course, Cardiff had to lose to Hull, which Hull had picked up 6 points in about 14, 20 odd games, however many it was. It was insanely how bad they were since they lost Grzycki.
20 games. So basically, they had won one game in their last 19 going into the Cardiff match. Basically they'd won one match since New Year's Day, which must be one of the worst runs of form ever at this level. I mean, I'm not sure I can remember anything quite like that sustained length of poor form.
I mean, it's the sort of team that Swans end up losing to historically, but generally speaking, since losing Jared Bowen and Grzycki, they've been on free fall and absolutely deserve all they've had about them since, because owners and everything about them. I feel sorry for the fans, but the whole management of that club is a mess, and we're talking from a club who have some experience in messes of ownership. But they've been an absolute joke, to be honest with you, since for a long time now, Hull. So we didn't hold up any hope of Cardiff slipping up there. So realistically, Guto, we were all looking and saying, actually, the most unfancied or probable situation would be for that dramatic turnaround, which you've just explained so succinctly there, in that we needed to beat Reading by a number of goals and hope, even though Forest would have been favourites at home against Stoke, hope that Stoke could do us a massive favour, even though they had nothing to play for and Forest had everything to play for. We had to hope for a bloody miracle, and that's all we could have done. And it spoke in the lead up to the game. It was more fantasy, of course, as we said, than reality. But we needed to say, let's assume Stoke win, because if they don't, then it doesn't matter what we do. They have to win, Stoke. So let's look at the possibility of Stoke winning that game, and let's say, what's the worst case scenario? Stoke win, what's the worst case scenario? Stoke will only win by 1 goal, in which case we need to win by 4. So irrespective of what happened at the City ground, we needed to make sure we went out against Reading and we attacked and we scored goals. If we did our job, then we just had to leave it up to the gods to see what happened elsewhere. What happened elsewhere and what happened against Reading at the Medeski was something that will last, I'm sure, for the rest of my life in my memory. It was absolutely unbelievable.
It really was. I mean, Steve, before we get on to the game, I mean, how did you feel about supporting Stoke in a football match? I'm not sure if I've ever done that before, I'll be honest. Stoke, not traditionally one of my favourite teams. My opinion of them has quite possibly changed in the last 24 hours or so. But I'll be honest, I felt it a bit weird having to actually cheer on Stoke City, a team that I've hated for so long. Did you, before the match, did you think that Stoke would beat Forest, regardless of by how many goals? Did you think, yeah, do you know what, Stoke may beat Forest tonight? And that would have, of course, given us a mathematical hope, even if it would have given us still a lot of work to do in our own game.
I didn't think Stoke winning was impossible, but I did think it was unlikely. I can't lie about that. I think the whole thing just seemed very unlikely. I mean, yesterday morning, Radio Wales had me on, and they were asking me about what I thought, and I just said, all we've got to do is just make sure that we win, and then obviously hope that the door opens. But I mean, realistically, the door was not going to open, was it? It just didn't seem like it. And as you've already said, really, Hull's form so shocking, you couldn't see Cardiff slipping up, so we've written that off. Forest seem more likely, but at the same time, they're home to a side who struggled all season with nothing to play for. So, yeah, I mean, supporting Stoke, yeah, a bit of a strange one. If I'm honest, I sort of resent the fact that one of the reasons they've stayed up is because they took 6 points off us. Could have been a golden chance to send them down to more misery and not play them, of course, as well. So that was a bit strange, but I think they've done something that has made me happy for once, really. That's probably the best way of looking at it. But yeah, just no one surely could have foreseen what was going to happen last night. I mean, even the most optimistic Swans fan would probably have said that we might go close and miss out on goal difference. But how often do you see the type of thing that happened last night where you get a team that's 3 points behind another side and the goal difference isn't in your favour, or should I say you might need a 1-goal swing or something like that, then you might think it's possible. But to see like a 5-goal swing, I mean, it's you can't really ever imagine that it's going to happen. It's just that, but while it is there, you think, well, it's not impossible. It's just very, very unlikely. But I suppose it's sort of typical Swans. We are the type of team that can perform miracles on occasion. And yeah, I'm sure when we get into it, we'll explain just what happened.
What I love about it, Steve, as well, is how late the drama unfolded. It was a full hour gone when the scores were so close.
Let's go through the game, because we started off very well, and not long into the first half, really, we took the lead with Matt, a contender for goal of the season, in my opinion. I mean, let's face it, we haven't scored that many fantastic goals this season, but a strike from 30 plus yards in a big game like that definitely probably goes down as one of the goals of the season in my book. And then news comes in then that Hull, unsurprisingly, were losing to Cardiff. But, of course, the news came in as well. The Stoke were up against Nottingham Forest. At that stage, we're starting perhaps to think, maybe this is a possibility, right?
I wasn't one that thought the Stoke necessarily would win, but I was caught up in this. I was swept up in it, and the people were saying that was our best opportunity, and I believed that. And that was more relative, perhaps, to the fact that Hull was shockingly bad than Stoke's own ability. But it was more that Stoke could beat Forest on a given day if they fancied it. So I believed that, and I was like, well, Stoke are actually, and I remember saying in a couple of WhatsApp chats last night that, you know what, our best chance here may actually be Stoke doing us an absolutely humongous favour, which is something I've never believed in. And as it turned out, someone like James McLean as well. But in actual fact, as the game panned out, it seemed originally that, yes, Brewster has scored what looks like a goal of the season, maybe actually beaten to goal of the season by something that happened about an hour later, which we'll discuss in a bit. But yeah, absolutely phenomenal strike. And that really set the tone for me. It really made me feel like, why has Brewster hit that from 35 plus yards? It was an absolutely phenomenal strike. We'll criticise the Reading keeper in due course because he's flapped at it and he should have saved it.
But by the way, the Reading keeper, just a couple of hours, I guess minutes after the full-time whistle, was given Reading's Player of the Season award, ironically, which was unfortunate.
It was before, actually, he was awarded it. I found out about it in the afternoon that he'd been awarded the Player of the Season, which is ironic. You mentioned that, actually, because I'd actually, in a conversation with some fans that I know who were Reading supporters during the game, was messaging them saying, didn't this bloke just win your Player of the Season award in the afternoon, which is quite funny because I didn't rate him at all during the game. He seemed to flap at everything. He seemed to be very uncomfortable in his own skin on that football pitch. And I know I'm not the only one. There's thousands of you out there some of you will be listening to this podcast who will have followed Twitter and Facebook and everything that was going on last night through social media and have seen people saying, we need to take more shots at this keeper. He looks scared to be on that football pitch. And you can pick any one of those 4 goals that happened last night and look at them in a critical sense. But take that first one as a little snapshot of it. He's hit that from 35 yards. He's had plenty of time to look at it. It's an absolute screamer. But you cannot tell me that the keeper shouldn't have done better there. And there was a little, I won't lie, there was a little sense of me that said at that point when I found out that Stoke were winning against Nottingham Forest, that said to me, if Stoke are going to do the unthinkable here and do us a favour and we don't then go and score 5, 6, 7 goals against Reading, then it is our own fault. Because at that point, if Stoke win, theoretically at least, it's in our hands. Whether it means we need to score 5 goals or whatever it is that we need to score, it's in our hands. And we needed to do the business then. So I thought, do you know what? I feel comfortable with this because at least we can control this scenario. And yes, going back to your original point, yeah, I did feel at that point then, maybe, just maybe, there's some late drama to happen in this championship season.
And Steve, things did get better because Yaku Mete, Reading's top scorer, a very good striker, lost his head a little bit, raised his hands to Mike van der Horn. He went down a little bit softly, perhaps, but he was shown red. At that point, of course, everything's going Swansea's way, really. But then there's a controversial penalty which equals things up. What was your opinion on both of those decisions?
I think the red card, I think if it's given against you, you'd be quite annoyed. Obviously, if it's given for you, I think I can sort of see why it's given. I think it is a little bit harsh, to be honest with you. But obviously, from our point of view, it didn't do us any harm. And I think at that point, really, like I say, we won the lap after that brilliant goal. And with Stoke winning as well, you're thinking, right, well, we need a 3-goal swing against 10 men. They don't have much to play for you. This could be on. And then, right on the stroke of half time, pretty much, we give away what's a soft penalty, which, again, is sort of a similar one. I can see why it's been given, but it's a foolish one, really, to give away. And obviously, when they've scored it, then you're thinking, shot ourselves in the foot here. And you think it can be difficult sometimes to break down 10 men, whereas if you've already got the lead, obviously at some point they have to come out and take some sort of risk, and then it gives you a chance to add more goals. But I think that I did feel a bit deflated then half time, because it seemed to have given us that little opening, and we sort of shot ourselves in the foot then, and obviously we needed to reassert ourselves, and those goals, the winning margin that we needed, did seem quite far away.
Yeah, half time, 1-1 in our game. Still 1-0 to Stoke against Forest, but so it's still all to play for, really. But we had a lot of work to do in the second half, Matt. And I know my concern really was that over the last few games we've played very, very well in first halves, but the second halves we've tended to tire a lot. Fatigue has really hampered us against teams like Leeds, Forest. It very nearly caught us out against Bristol City as well. I was worried looking at that, thinking, do you know what? I can't see us going out and scoring 3 goals in the second half the way that we've tired in previous second periods. And I guess the second half, we made some substitutions, took off Van der Horn. I think we brought on Routledge and Danda at halftime, I think it was. Took off Fulton as well, who I actually thought had a decent first half, even though he missed some good chances. But, Cooper, he's been criticised for not making changes early enough. Well, he couldn't be criticised the other night. But I did feel at the start of the second half that we were maybe a bit too desperate, that we were pushing the issue too much, that we were losing our shape, that we were making poor decisions, and emotions were running our decision making, really. And Christian O'Leary in the commentary actually said they need to just be patient here. I know that sounds strange when we know we need goals, but they need to be patient here because it just wasn't working. There was a period actually where Reading, even with 10 men, looked pretty comfortable, and they were when we were losing the ball, they were breaking and getting into dangerous positions. And then, of course, there was the news coming in then that the Forest had equalised against Stoke, and suddenly, with just over 25 minutes left to play, Nottingham Forest are drawing 1-1 against Stoke, and we're drawing 1-1 against Reading. It's game over at this stage, isn't it?
It is, and going back to an earlier point you were making about the start of the second half, I absolutely agree with what you were saying, and it all ties in if you consider what that team talk was. And we found out a little bit about that halftime team talk, and that Cooper had told the players that he would relay what their requirements were, what was going on elsewhere, and what they needed to do in order to, if there was a possibility of securing promotion or playoff place, what they would need to do. So we're seeing there, I feel like perhaps one of Cooper's most passionate halftime team talks. And I don't say that nonchalantly. I don't say that just as a flippant comment, but I see that on the pitch as well. I say what I say because of what I see on the pitch. And you're absolutely right. I feel like that last 45 minutes, we came out and we looked desperate. We looked like we realised we needed to score a shit ton of goals, and however it came, and we were just going to try and force the issue, and it wasn't working, as you say, and the news filtered through after the hour that Forest had equalised. But I think the message that came out from half time and the substitutions that you mentioned as well, which is so unlike Steve Cooper. I mean, for any other manager, you may say, it's a couple of half-time substitutions, get over yourself. But in context, Steve Cooper has used so few substitutions and so even fewer substitutions before the 80-minute mark in games that this is a massive bolt from the blue for him. And this is, for me, a significant moment in his managerial development as well, in that he realized at this point that it was shit or bust. It was a moment where he just either decided whether this season was going to fizzle out or whether he was going to say, do you know what, we could end up losing 3 or 4-1 to a 10-man Reading tonight. But I feel like I'd get more criticism for not going for this and throwing caution to the wind. And he threw. I made a tweet yesterday. He didn't just roll the dice; he absolutely hurled the dice. He went for it at halftime, and he threw things at Red. And I felt like, do you know what? It's an old adage that says fortune favours the brave. And last night, fortune favoured the brave, but not at 65 minutes, was it, on the clock when Nottingham Forest equalised? And at that point, you felt like maybe, well, almost certainly rather, this is too much. And you felt that in the Swans TV commentary as well, where the commentators were a little bit downbeat, even as the start of the dramatic scenes were underway.
Well, Matt, Steve, let's get on to that really, because just after Nottingham Forest had equalised against Stoke, which eased the nerves at the City ground, Wayne Routledge pops up. We spoke about Bruce being a candidate for goal of the season. The Wayne Routledge goal, I mean, talk us through it. It is a work of art, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, like I say, Brewster's was probably our goal of the season for about an hour until this goal. Yeah, it's probably because of the context of the game, and you sort of look back at it now, it probably doesn't get the credit it deserves, really, but it's a great pass from Grimes, and then obviously he's taken a lovely touch, and then before the ball's hit the ground, obviously, he's just chipped the goalkeeper, and it's gone in. Just it wasn't really a lot of power in it, was it? But it was just this lovely chip, and he couldn't really have hit it any better. It was such a stunning and lovely goal that not many players probably could score. And I remember thinking at the time, look, we're probably not going to get anywhere here, but we might win the game. Could be Routledge's last game for us. You just think that's not a bad way to go out scoring the winner, and it's obviously such a good goal as well. And it's just not the type of goal you expect to see, really. And probably, when you think about it, one of the best goals I've seen in a long time from a Swans player. Certainly not the type that you see very often. So, I suppose it's the type of goal you'd expect to see from Lee Trundle, really, isn't it? So, yeah, well, amazing goal, and it obviously a big one as well, because it put us back in front. Obviously, we couldn't foresee what would happen at that point, but obviously that was the goal that sort of sparked off what would be a mad few minutes, both at the Medeski and the City ground.
Yeah, and huge credit as well to Matt Grimes for the pass to Routledge, because it's so perfectly weighted for him. I mean, Routledge definitely does as well as he can possibly do with that pass, but it is a stunning ball from Grimes, who I think is one of the players who's really excelled in the lockdown period as well. He's had a bit of stick at times this season. Perhaps people thinking he's not quite been as good as he was last year. I think he's benefited a lot from the new system, and he's really raised his game in lockdown. And that pass was beautiful. And for Wayne Routledge to control it and then lob the keeper like that, and do you know what? You don't see enough lobs in modern football. It used to be quite fashionable. You'd see more goals being scored by just players lifting the ball over the keeper's head into the empty goal. You just don't see enough of it these days. It was an absolutely fantastic goal, and I think probably the best goal we've scored this season. I'll be honest. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But it also, I think, came at a very important time, because we were losing our grip on the game a bit. I think that, like we said, the desperation was just getting to us. Frustration was boiling over. Things weren't really going right for us at that stage. It just wasn't quite clicking. And then all of a sudden, that moment of magic put us in the lead and just calmed everything down. And suddenly, everybody just wised up a little bit, which is ironic, because the 25 minutes which followed were the craziest that we've seen in, well, God knows how long, Matt. I mean, I'm trying to remember the order things happened, but if I remember rightly, suddenly news came in from the City ground that Stoke had scored. And then you start to think, oh, well, that's interesting. And then just a couple of minutes later, you hear they've got another. And suddenly it's on, isn't it?
Yeah, it was quick succession. Stoke went 2-1 up and then 3-1 up. And I remember saying on social media that our best bet may actually turn out to be Stoke having an absolute worldie of an evening and doing us a massive favour, because we at this point still didn't look like we were going to get enough of the job done. I mean, we were 2-1 up through Routledge's, as you rightly said. The only person who could compete with Brewster's 35-plus yard effort was Routledge, and he's done that with an absolutely sublime goal. So I think he might have just pipped him to it there. So we're winning, and we're finding out the Stoke are winning as well, and we're realizing then Stoke are 2 goals up, so there's 2. We're 1 goal up, so there's 3 in total. There needs to be 2 more in there, and that was the point where I think we felt like absolutely like this could be monumental, because Stoke now have a comfortable lead against Forest, and it's down to us to step up. And there were substitutions happening, and I wasn't even aware were happening. I didn't realise Liam Cullen was on the pitch.
No, do you know what? That's one of the things with 5 substitutions. I've often this season found myself just wondering, wait, when did that guy come on?
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to keep up. But yeah, Liam Cullen came on. I was like, who did he come on for? I can't actually remember who went off for Liam Cullen. But he came onto the pitch, and he made a difference, didn't he?
Oh, it was a striker's finish as well, because I've tweeted the build up to it. It was a quick throw taken, and a fantastic throw by Roberts, and giving a bit of context to it, reading Liam Cullen's assessment of the situation after the game. Everyone at the club believes in Andreu's ability to win his aerial battles, and I mean, as fans, we can see that he wins far more than his fair share of them, being he's not particularly tall, so he wins a lot more than he should. And all at the club believe that as well. He's fantastic in the air, we all know that. And he knew as soon as that ball was heading towards AU that he had to gamble on where that ball was going to land, and he did. And it's a rising half volley. He hasn't scored a senior goal before, and this guy's he's come onto the pitch. He's playing for his hometown club, and he's hit a rising half volley into the roof of the net, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he scored what may turn out to be the most important goal of his, even at his young age, it may turn out to be the most important goal of his career, and it's his first ever goal, and senior goal rather, and it's absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe what was going on, and do you know what? I don't know if you agree with me here, but when you were watching this, the heart started racing at this point, and everything started getting a bit frantic, and started getting a little bit of a blur, because a lot of shit was going on, and no one really knew exactly how this was going to pan out, but we were all a bit panicked at this stage.
I mean, that goal really did start getting people dreaming, I think, because, and like you said, it's a really good finish by Cullen as well. He keeps that ball under control, keeps it down in the corner. It's past the keeper before he can really do anything about it. It's a fantastic strike. And fair play as well to Cullen, because I thought he was impressive as well when he came on against Bristol City. He, for the first time, I think, against Bristol City, looked like he belonged in the senior team. I think he now looks like he's settled. I've always liked Cullen. I've always thought that he has the potential to be to make the grade. And I think against Bristol City, he made a really good impact off the bench, just controlling things and keeping the ball, etc. And then against Reading, to get your first senior goal in those circumstances, I mean, insane. And suddenly, Steve, 5 minutes to go. We need 1 goal, or Stoke need to get 1 goal. That's all that needs to happen for us to go into the playoffs. All of a sudden, I'll be honest, I'm starting to think, do you know what? I think we may do this. I'm starting to think that with everything going our way at that point, I'm starting to think, do you know what? I'm getting to the stage where I think we may actually do it.
Yeah, I think I was the same. When they get to the point where we just needed 1 goal, and there was plenty of time really just to get that 1 goal. Obviously, we were in the ascendancy. It didn't really feel as if even if Forest obviously were
It's
struggling
funny.
by that point.
It's funny you say you've got plenty of time. I mean, it was 5 minutes plus any added time, but it felt like a very long time all of a sudden.
Well, the thing is,
Goals.
you always think in that 5 minutes plus thing, you will get at least one chance, don't you? If you know what I mean. Possibly more than one, I would say. But it just seemed like everything was going for us, and how it had turned dramatically, and you do start to believe then that maybe it's on, isn't it? And then obviously the golden moment comes, doesn't it, where Routledge meets that header and nods it in, and I think my neighbours by this stage are wondering what the hell is going on, because I've lost the plot. I'm jumping around the room and screaming. I'm sure I probably wasn't the only one, but yeah, it was the only tinge of like disappointment really is that obviously we're all in our houses rather than there, because you can imagine if we were actually there, it would have been ridiculous by this point. Because
Steve,
obviously, go on.
No, if we had a couple of thousand in that away end, I don't think there would be an away end left today. I'll be honest. I think it would have crumbled, because I can't actually imagine how we would have responded in that moment. It did cross my mind. I didn't want to think of what if we had fans there. I didn't want to think of that, but I couldn't help it really. And I think if there were fans behind that goal, I mean, it would
on the pitch.
It would have probably been people on the pitch. It would have been full-blown pitch invasion. It would have been carnage, probably. Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's no two ways about it. There's nothing like it with football. I remember earlier this season the Leeds away game where we nicked it at the end, and it was absolutely bonkers. Like, I think for about 15 minutes after the game, everyone was still in there singing, hurling abuse at the Leeds fans, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? And it's just that shame that we didn't get that moment in the ground, and it's one of those things, isn't it? Unfortunately, what can you say about it?
But it does speak volumes about the magnitude of that moment, Matt, that even though none of us were there to witness it, we were all watching on our TVs, it still just feels so special. It felt like such an event, if I'm being honest, and it is something that I think we're going to be talking about for years to come, even though none of us will be able to say I was there.
It kind of diluted my previous opinion that Liverpool having won the Premier League for the first time in 30 years, it won't be the same given that it was behind closed doors, because that was my opinion for a long time, that they've had this tainted trophy. And yet last night I felt every kick of that ball. I felt every moment of it, and I felt as passionately as I would have if I was in the stadium, because I was like Steve. I was jumping up and down. I was screaming. I was felt everything, and I was just
I'll be
caught
honest,
up in it.
I can't remember what I was doing. I really can't. That the celebrations is just a blur to me. I may have been shouting and screaming. I may have woken up the neighbours. I really have no way of knowing. I'll be honest. It's just one big blur. It was as if I'd taken some kind of hallucinogenic drug or licked a toad or something. I just did some kind of weird out-of-body experience, basically.
It was incredible. It was just, I say this, it's like nothing I've ever experienced, but it's obviously we're in strange times at the moment with the pandemic and whatnot. I don't think I've ever felt this way before. Last night was, in my opinion, the most dramatic end, and not just our game, but generally across the division, the most dramatic end to a regular season in league history in Britain. And I challenge anyone to provide me with more information that proves me wrong here. But you've got automatics to still be decided. You've got playoffs to still be decided. You've got the bottom three to still be decided. And almost all of them were decided with late moments. Not even they were done and dusted with 3-0 leads 20 minutes in. They were all decided late on. And it's just absolutely crazy what was unfolding in front of our eyes. Not to put it too bluntly here, but there was a moment of history. This is the moment you look back on and go, do you remember that time when we needed to do a 5-goal swing against Reading, and we achieved it? It was absolutely phenomenal. And it was a moment at the end of the game when that final whistle blew. There was that pause where the players just felt like, do you know what? We've got a 3-goal advantage here. We know Stoke are winning. Obviously, I said earlier on that Cooper relayed that their plan was to relay to the players. There's a lovely clip in the highlights, if you watch it back, of when Routledge scores the goal that sends us all into utter delirium. And Andre Ayew goes to claim the ball. And the first thing he does, Andre Ayew, with the ball in his arms, he runs over to the dugout and starts speaking to Cooper, asking him what Swansea need to do. What is this enough? Are we okay? I mean, it's a risky strategy. I mean, anything could have happened at the City ground, but the message was what was going on elsewhere, which is just like, it's just crazy. You just do not get this happening in football matches. And the way it all culminated last night was, I don't think we'll ever see anything like that again.
No, because of course we took the lead, and suddenly for the first time in the night we were actually in the playoff spot, Steve. But there was that kind of moment then. Do we stick or twist? Do we keep going and going for another goal, which would put it beyond doubt, really? Or do we just try and kill play, which is what we did in the end, and hope that there are no further goals at the City ground? I mean, did you think that? I'll be honest. I was kind of like, please just keep trying to score. At least, give some kind of threat. Because I did have this worry the whole time, like, oh, what if Forest get a late equaliser? And of course, when message got through to the City ground that we were 4-1 up, they panicked and threw everybody forward because they had suddenly messed up in the most horrendous way and desperately needed a goal, which of course contributed in the end to Stoke's goal. When you look at the breakaway for their fourth, when there are no Forest players back there, it kind of reminded me slightly of the Darren Prattley goal in 2011, possibly, although very, very different goals, obviously, but there were some similarities. I mean, what were your memories of those final minutes after Routledge's goal?
I think a lot of it's a blur, to be honest. I think I spent a lot of it on my phone trying to find out what was going on at the City ground, really, rather than paying so much attention to our game. I think I sort of am with you, though. I remember we were playing for time in the corner, and I was thinking, like, obviously, like, we're in a good position here, but at the same time, if there is another goal in that game, it could completely screw us over. So I think mainly I was thinking, like, if we do get another chance to score, or we get a chance to take it to the corner, try and score. Because if we do score again, then surely that's it. Because there was no way Forest would get 2 to then equalise, which is what they would have needed to do. So, yeah, it would have, obviously, if we then cocked it up and conceded, you do look ridiculous, don't you? But I can see what you're saying, and I was thinking along the same lines, because, as you say, really, Forest have then gone, obviously they found out what's happened, so they've tried to get a goal themselves, and they've undone themselves, really, haven't they? Which is, my heart bleeds, if I'm honest with you. But, yeah, it's mad that in the end, like, obviously there was more than the swing that we even needed, wasn't there? So, like, we could have even afforded to concede one, and then we still would have ended up in there, because Stoke ended up getting that fourth. So, it just sums up really just how mad the situation was, really. And as Matt said, it was probably the most dramatic evening ending to any division, because it wasn't just like, you had the Aguero moment years ago with Man City, but I mean, it was across the division, really. A story of late goals, and the fact that we hadn't been in the playoffs since mid-January. We nicked in there, and I know Barnsley at the bottom got out of the bottom 3 for the first time since September and stuff like that. It was just anything that could happen seemed to happen, and it just seems like results toed and froed. And it was just a surreal night, really. And I suppose because nobody could go to the games, everybody was sort of informed of everything and knew what was going on. Whereas, like, I think if we were at games, we'd have probably gone back on the train or the bus or whatever, looked at the phone and gone, wow, all this happened, and you see that goal went in at that time and everything like that. But I suppose we did at least get to witness all what was going on, because none of us could go. But yeah, what a crazy night, like, in general, and obviously we were at the forefront of it, really, weren't we?
And Matt, looking back, right, not absolutely everything went our way in this on that evening, because of course there was a controversial penalty that was given against us. Forest did equalise, and that looked for a while like it was probably going to be enough for them until they messed it up again. But looking back at both our game and Forest game, there were so many small moments other than the goals, which
Oh yeah.
which could have just been definitive. I mean, Forest actually started their game very, very well and could have been 2-0 up before they fell behind. That could have changed the game entirely. They had chances then, of course, throughout the game. But if any one of those had gone in, really, it would have been a different outcome. And the same goes for our game. I mean, while we were pushing, in fairness to Reading, they were still leaving two men up on the halfway line, ready to break and try and capitalise while we were pushing up. It helped us as well, because there were fewer. They weren't exactly parking the bus, Reading, it has to be said. But they were still ready to counter attack, and they had their chances. And Mulder pulled off a few saves. Gay made a fantastic block very late on, which, you know, if he doesn't make that block, it's probably a goal and it's probably game over. Looking back, there were so many moments in both games where, had just one of those things been different, then it would have been a totally different night.
I'm not one at all ever to talk about fate or the fate of the gods or anything like that, but you're absolutely right, Guto. I mean, there's so much that happened. And let's credit Reddit and Stoke, who between them had the square root of fuck all to play for last night, and both gave as good as they got. Stoke emphatically so, but Reading, I mean, as you said, they had about 3 or 4 one-on-ones. Okay, they didn't make the most of them, but on that another day, that game could have finished 4-4 or even worse for us. But that's the way it goes. You're not playing in the middle of the season anymore where you say, do you know what, take a draw today and then we'll try and pick up next week. This was do or die. Simple mathematics told us that we needed to win, and we needed to win emphatically. So the threat of conceding was no longer a threat to us, and the openness of the game played out, and it was an absolutely delightful affair, even if my fingernails are chewed to the absolute quick now. But it was incredible to watch. As you summed it up perfectly. There was so many chances for Reading to ruin a party, a potential party, and at the other end, I've seen the highlights. Nottingham Forest could have scored 3 or 4 goals themselves. They missed a hatful of chances, late blocks and miss-hit shots, and you have to. I've got nothing else to say other than the fact that it's just sometimes it's meant to be, and I felt like everything that happened last night, it was just our night.
It was just our night, and it was one of those nights, Steve, that they don't come around too often, do they? They really don't. I think. And when you look at everything that needed to happen for last night to be a success, I think there are fans who could go their entire lives and not have a night quite like that on Wednesday. I mean, we've had more important nights. The Hull win, for example, to keep us in the league. The various promotion deciders that we've had over the years. I mean, this at the end of the day only gets us into the playoffs. There's still a lot of work to do. We'll get on to what has to be done later. But I mean, just as an occasion, last game of the season, and just to pick out such a just miraculous set of results. I can't remember anything like this happening in my time as a Swans fan. And I'm struggling to think of too many occasions where other clubs have had these types of results add up for them in this way. It's just such an unlikely scenario. And it means that we are going to be talking about this game. Whatever happens in the playoffs in the coming weeks, we'll always look back at this game and say, do you remember that night? How unbelievable was that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like we'll never forget, really, isn't it? Because it was just so dramatic. I mean, you could never expect what happened to ever happen, can you? I mean, as I've said, you go into the last day, you're 3 points behind, and the goal difference has to swing by a handful as well. You just think to yourself, well, it surely can't happen. I mean, you never see anybody else do it, and somehow, obviously, it's happened, and it's happened in such a dramatic way where all the turning points have come late on, and what I think the odds on, I saw a Nottingham Forest fan had put them to lose by 3 and us to win by 3 on a bet, and it was 290 to 1. But I mean, you're talking about, imagine what the odds would have been on 65 minutes, where you then still needed that 5-goal swing. I mean, you'd be talking in the thousands if you're being realistic. It was not on, even in the slightest. And the fact that it happened is just crazy. I mean, it's a night nobody will ever forget. Obviously, it's there's more to come now. Obviously, depending on what's going to happen with us in the playoffs. But yeah, it's definitely not a night that people will forget. There's no two ways about it, because I mean, how has it happened? I think everyone's still in a bit of a state of disbelief, really, aren't they, as to how things panned out?
I know I'm in a state of disbelief. It still hasn't quite, jumped from the realm of fantasy to the real world yet. To me, it still feels like some kind of mad dream, really. It doesn't feel real that we've accomplished what we accomplished on Wednesday night. And Matt, one person who takes so much credit is Steve Cooper, a man who we have discussed so much this season. We have been very critical of him at times this season. His first season here has been one of ups and downs. There have been some very good times here. There have been times where we really couldn't see what he was trying to do, really, while he's been here. But it has to be said, since lockdown, he has really just found his system, found a way of getting us successful. The formation, he's clearly inspired the players. You could see by the reaction at full time the togetherness that's in this squad, and I don't think that's ever been in doubt. I think the players have always had his back and have always, done their best for him. But he's managed to get them playing beyond themselves, really, in this period. He's managed to get them playing with energy, with organisation. We're scoring goals at a rate that we haven't done previously. We look hungry. Everything is clicking, and I'd say probably we've left our best football of the season until the final weeks of the season. And Cooper, for all the criticism that he's received before, I don't think anybody would deny he's turned it around in the last month. He really has made big changes, which, my God, they have paid dividends, haven't they?
Oh, there's so much to unpack from what you were just saying there. First and foremost, massive credit to Steve Cooper. I mean, I've been one of his most vocal critics, and I'm not a fan of his. I've never been a fan of his since he came here, really. I've not really adapted to anything he's tried to do. But however he's come across this formation, and whether he's stumbled across it through injuries and suspensions or whatnot, I don't even care. I mean, the reality is, I disliked Steve Cooper's style of play. I disliked his stubbornness in not changing the style. And the way we've gone through 3/4 of the season playing this turgid, boring, negative style of football, which just was not how I wanted us to play. So when I see that change dramatically, and I mean, I'm a big Graham Potter fan, and Graham Potter had us finishing, pretty much mid-table. Let's be honest, quite a few positions off the playoffs in the end last season, and it wasn't. For me, it was an enjoyable season because I was enjoying the style of play. Now, I really want to see us play nice football, and what we've seen over the last few weeks with Steve Cooper is he's come across this new formation, and it's like striking gold. And I remember saying a week, 10 days ago, I'm so much more enjoying the Swansea football now, and I'm a little bit gutted that we didn't do it 3 or 4 games earlier, because I really feel like if we had done, we might have just snuck into the playoffs. Because let's be honest, this style of football will look so much more solid defensively, because these 3 centre backs turn into 5 defenders once we're under attack. In attack, we've got so much more options available, and we look more fluid and available. The players I've never doubted, and you'll never find a recording of me saying that I've doubted the players are playing for him. The players have always wanted to play for him. You see the way all season, someone we've labelled a mercenary in Andre Ayew has embraced Steve Cooper through the season. It's quite clear the players want to play for this guy. It was the style of football we were playing, which was my issue. I'm a massive, massive fan of the way we're playing right now. I've got no gripes with Steve Cooper. I had a gripe before last night about his lack of substitutions and his lack of going for it and making changes earlier on in the game. But even last night, he did all that earlier on, and he made the massive, massive changes that made the biggest difference in a game that we needed to win heavily, and we did. So here's hoping that those were important milestones in his development that he takes on and he thinks, well, actually, maybe I should be doing a little bit more of this going forward. But it's absolutely incredible the way this last few weeks have developed in terms of our style of play. The results have came as a way of that style changing, and I won't deny the fact that I was a critic of Cooper because of the way we were playing, and now I'm a supporter of the way we were playing. And I'll say it now: of the 4 teams in the playoffs, of us, Brentford, Fulham, and Cardiff, we are the team to miss, the team to avoid in the playoffs. We are the team to come into this playoffs now that nobody wants to play. Brentford have just missed out on top 2. They look deflated. They look heartbroken. The Cardiff and Fulham, they've coasted there. Relatively speaking, they've coasted there. Swansea have got in there by the grit of their teeth just at the last moment through the most dramatic of fashion. If anyone's blood is going to be pumping at 140, it's going to be Swansea's. And I genuinely think at this point, and how often do we say this, the team that sneaks into the playoffs at 6th place on the last day of the season, they're the ones you've got to watch out for. And I'm full of enthusiasm for this now. Even if it doesn't work, I'm not going to pin my hopes on it and my heart on it, whatever. But looking at it objectively, I would say that and the highlights show last night on Quests reiterated my point, really, that both of them presenters felt like Swansea would be in the playoff final. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if I was a fan of the other clubs, I'd be worrying about Swans right now.
Well, we'll get on to discuss the playoff picture in a bit more depth in a bit. But Steve, just finishing off on the Steve Cooper point, just look at the record since lockdown. We've played 9 games, we've won 5 of them, drawn 3 and lost only 2. That's an impressive record. We've picked up very nearly 2 points per game in that period. And one of the keys, I think, is that throughout the season we've been critical of Cooper because of his failure to get the best out of players. We've had good players who have just been struggling to find their top form, and that's not due to lack of effort or anything. It's just that they seem to be playing it in a style and a system that didn't really suit them. And that's the big difference I think we've seen over the last month, is that we are now playing a style of play with a formation that gets the best out of so many of these players who were struggling beforehand. The likes of Bidwell, the likes of Gay, the likes of Connor Roberts. Grimes is one that's really flourished in this period. And those players then who were doing well before, and the likes of Gallagher, Ayew, Brewster, they've continued to thrive in this system. They haven't been affected in any kind of way by this change of system. We have really stumbled onto the system that gets the best out of these players, haven't we?
Yeah, we definitely have. I mean, I think from about February onwards, I remember thinking that this could be an option for us, this formation, really, because obviously we've been quite lucky in terms of centre backs, one of the strongest areas of the side this season. So then if you could put in 3 centre backs, as I've said before, and then some of our full backs are quite good going forward, Roberts especially, so it would suit him. And then you don't have to play with wingers, which, if we're honest, has been a bit of a weakness for us this season. And then obviously Andre Ayew can, the debate about where he should play is always going to be one that will differ for a lot of people, but him being able to play up front in a 2 for me is probably the best option, and that has worked as well now. So since then, we have just played so much better. It's got the best out of the players. We've created more chances, dominated more games, I would say. So, the fact is, since we changed the formation, 13 points from 6 games. You can't really argue with that. If you put it over a season, you'd be right at the top. So it's made a big difference, and we need to try and, certainly stick with it now through the playoffs. It'll be difficult to say what we'll do next season because obviously the turnover in players is going to be substantial, you would have thought, and obviously depending on what division, and you don't know. But it's definitely the way forward for the next 2 or possibly 3 games, depending on how long we stay in the playoffs for. So, yeah, it's a system that works, and there's no way really why we should change it now.
No, definitely not. Let's move on to those playoffs, even though I'll be honest with you, I've barely thought about them at all. Well, we've actually qualified for them, but my mind is still at the Medeski on Wednesday night. I'm still just in that zone of disbelief, basically, where I'm still astonished by what we've seen and still just basking in the glow of that result. But we do have 2 absolutely massive games coming up now, games that we did not expect to have to play, but they're a great opportunity, Matt. We're one of 4 teams who have a chance to get that final promotion spot. And you said, you hinted there about Brentford. They've been, I don't think anybody will argue, out of the 4 teams in this in the playoffs. Looking over the season as a whole, I don't think anybody will argue they've been the better team consistently. They are the league's top scorers. They've got some of the best players in the league, especially Ollie Watkins and Sai Ben Rama up front. Absolutely fantastic players to watch, especially Ben Rama, who's a really gifted player. Reminds you a bit of Adel Taarabt, really, in the way he plays, just that individual brilliance. And we saw earlier on in the season what they can do, because they gave us a pretty good beating both times we played them, but scoring 6 goals between the 2 games, winning 3-0 and 3-1. So we know what Brentford can do. And if you look at the form table over the whole of the lockdown, they're second in that form table, just behind Leeds. They'd won 8 games in a row before this week, but those last 2 games, how damaging are they going to be? Are we going to see a damaged Brentford when they come up against the Swans on Sunday?
You need to consider the context. Now, Brentford are winning all their games when they were playing the chasing pack, when the expectation wasn't on them, but they were just chasing and putting pressure on. The moment that West Brom slipped up and it allowed Brentford an opportunity to sneak into that second position, they faltered. And they faltered again last night. And I think that's the key moment. It's not just about winning the games. It's about being, and it's easier to be the chasing pack than it is to be chased. And I think when the moment came for Brentford to step up, I think that's the moment where they didn't play characteristically well, as you expect from a Brentford team. And I feel like the occasion got to them, and it's not a slight on them. It's not like a dig at them, whatever. But I feel like they will feel the burden of what they missed out on, and they'll know that they could have achieved the unthinkable, which is a Brentford team in the Premier League, their first season in a new ground, historic moment for them. And if anyone's going to tell me they don't feel that, then I feel like they're being a little bit naive, and they may try and push it to one side for the next week or 2. But it's I think the man just got a bit of a job on there, now to boost. You can imagine saying to a team, sorry guys, we missed out on the top 2. Yeah, we faltered, but let's get ourselves back up for 3 more games and get promoted through the playoffs. It's going to be a hard thing to get them back up and motivated. Not that you shouldn't have to be motivated for the playoffs. They're a fantastic occasion, but it's not often that the team that just misses out on automatic promotion gets that massive motivation boost to go up. And I do think they'll be affected by it. They're a fantastic team. And I think, as I said at the start of this, is the context in which they didn't get automatically promoted, which may be the key point. As soon as the opportunity came, that's when they didn't win the game.
Yeah, the dynamics are fascinating, Steve. because like Matt said, that the pressure is all on Brentford. They were the team that were chasing automatic promotion. They will probably still be favourites for the playoffs. And yet, you look at what happened over the last few games. It's worth saying they've lost to good teams in Barnsley and Stoke, teams which were on form and firing. So it's not as if they've totally bottled it against really poor sides. But still, I mean, that they must be devastated. And it's one other thing I want to just throw in here, and I do believe it can sometimes have an impact. Brentford's playoff record is shocking. It's absolutely terrible. They've been in the playoffs 8 times and have never gone up. They've only made the playoff. They've only made the final twice. And I often think that kind of hoodoo can hang over a club going into the playoffs. You see it. There are some clubs that just have these awful playoff records. Sheffield United is a famous one. Lincoln used to have an awful record where they'd always get into the playoffs and always lose, and it was clearly a real sort of albatross around their neck, and the pressure hung over them. I don't know about you, Steve, how much importance you place on that, but it's just one more thing for me that just puts that pressure on Brentford going into Sunday's match.
Yeah, I think obviously they're bound to be a little bit deflated at the moment, aren't they, Brentford, because of the whole situation. They would have put a lot into possibly getting automatic, and the chance was there, and obviously in the end they fell short, and obviously, but the chance was there for them as well. It wasn't a case of West Brom kept winning, was it? They did open the door and they blew it. In terms of their overall playoff record, yeah, I can sort of see what you mean, but at the same time, you probably have to try and forget about that. It's probably more from a fan's point of view that they'll be concerned, but last time Brentford was in the playoffs was probably about 5 years ago, was it? So I doubt there's that many players now that are still there, if that makes sense. So the mental scars shouldn't be there, but I think you can understand why Brentford might be on a little bit of a downer. But I mean, the point of view I'm going to look at it from is they did beat us twice this season. They finished above us by quite a few points. I think they are a better side than us. They are the favourites. But obviously, we have ended the season well. We've now found a style and formation that suits us. So, it does give us, the confidence that we can come out on top. But, it is going to be 2 tough games, I would have thought, against a side that has done well for the majority of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you as well, Steve. I still think it's going to be a very difficult game against Brentford, even if they are slightly down, slightly less confident than they would usually be. They're still a fantastic team. They thrashed us earlier on the season, albeit I would say this is a different Swansea team now to the one that was struggling to click back then. But still, the Swans haven't beaten a team which started a game above us in the table since last August when we beat Leeds. Of all the teams who finished above us, I think Cardiff's the only one that we've beaten all season. I still think going into these playoffs, the Swans are probably the 4th favourites out of all of them. I'd say Brentford, Fulham and Cardiff are ahead of us in the likelihood stakes. Having said that, Matt, I think these playoffs are looking much more open now than they would have done a couple of weeks back. And one of the interesting things is that while Brentford, of course, have finished on a downer, the other 3 teams, you could argue, are playing their best football of the season around about now. I mean, Fulham, I'll be honest with you, I've not been impressed with them for most of the season. I think they've underachieved massively. I think they should have been the top 2 with that squad. I don't think Scott Parker has really been playing a style which gets the best out of the individuals there. But over the last few weeks, they seem to have just wised up a little bit, matured a bit perhaps, and just become a little bit more professional and clinical perhaps in their approach. Cardiff, you have to say, have had a very good lockdown. They've not dropped many points in this period, and they've had a little bit of a wobble against Blackburn, but they've finished the job off very well. So you've got 3 teams who are very much in form, and then probably the best team of the 4 are just in that little bit of a slump towards the end of the season. It is fascinatingly poised, and who would you say is your favourite to go up out of those 4?
If I wasn't involved in it, it. If I wasn't involved in it right now and I looked at it, I wouldn't bet against us. I really wouldn't. And I didn't say anything I said in the last piece I spoke about in haste, because I really feel like at this point, they say the table doesn't lie after 46 games, and it's something I said to Steve earlier on. But I feel in this occasion it may actually be lying, because whilst we played 40 of the games playing a certain style, we were forced to change into a style that actually epitomizes the Swansea way, if you like, I say in inverted commas, is exactly the way we want to play. It's fast, it's fluid, it's creative. We look so much more solid defensively and so much more creative going forward. So everything about the play suits us down to the ground. But it's been played over such a short time span to look at us and say, well, Swansea sneaked in on the final day. Well, that's because we've only been playing this way of football for the last 2-3 weeks or so. So it's just a crazy all the season's been contracted into this mini season now, in which we've been playing this way. And if we talk about reducing this down to what it is now, which is potentially 3 games, if you remember after the lockdown, a few of the players and Cooper himself came out and said they're treating this end of the season now as tournament football, because it has that vibe about it, in the fact that it's almost like a shootout sort of game to jockey for position. I don't need to tell you and remind you that Cooper's had success in tournament football before, and so that was kind of sort of thing that excited me pre-lockdown anyway. When he said that sort of thing, or sorry, post-lockdown when he said that sort of thing, it made me thought, well, maybe this will play into his hands. The change of formation has helped, and I really feel like now. I mean, I know you mentioned Fulham being more mature and stuff. Mitrovic is a loose cannon at the best of times. It's only about a week, 10 days ago, where he elbowed someone in the face after 2 minutes and got a retrospective ban for what should have been a red card offence. So I'm not dismissing any teams in the playoffs. Brentford, fantastic team, probably the best team I've seen in the Championship this season. Fulham have the best squad in the Championship. I absolutely agree with you. Massively underachieved. Cardiff are on a rich vein of form. My concerns are whether Neil Harris is capable of taking the team to the Premier League. I'm not convinced. And then there's us. And of the 4, I think the dangerous one is the one that just sneaks into the playoffs with all the excitement and momentum that comes with it. We've got a massive task on our hands to get past Brentford. But I think as much as last night depended on Stoke's performance against Forest, and how Forest dealt with that pressure, the playoff semi-finals will depend on how Brentford deal with their pressure, because there's a lot of pressure on them now.
Yeah, and just a little interesting fact as well. The last 3 times now that we've made the playoffs, we have won our final games of the season by scoring 4 goals in the process. There's a little stat. Yeah,
that's a very good stat.
A little quirky one. Another interesting fact. Before we go, I've forgotten about this, but the referees have been announced for the first legs of the playoffs. And we've got Keith Stroud, who is not one of my favourite refs. I don't think he's the best, I'll be honest, for such a big game. But one of the interesting things is he was also the referee for the first leg of the last playoff meeting against Brentford back in 2006. He refereed the match down the Liberty, which finished 1-1, and he'll be back at the Liberty on Sunday, which is a fascinating coincidence. Of course, that day he sent off the Brentford keeper, so if he can give us a similar bit of help this time round, that would be much appreciated. Steve, where do you sit on the playoffs as a whole? Who are you looking at and thinking they're probably the ones that are most likely to go up to the Premier League?
But you'd have to fancy Brentford for the way they've played this season, and to be honest, really Fulham, wouldn't it? In terms of the seasons that they've had, the fact that they've had the most points, a fair bit more than us and Cardiff, and Fulham, especially when you look at the players they got. I know we've said it before. We think they're underachieving, but player-wise, they should be in the top two if we're being honest with us. So I think they'll feel like they should go up, whereas maybe us and Cardiff have got in there late on, and we'll feel that maybe momentum is with us a little bit. But let's certainly hope that it's not with Cardiff, should we say?
It's weird, Steve, you mentioned that, because I feel like after last night that if it wasn't Cardiff, if Cardiff would just piss off out of the playoffs, then I'd be quite content, because I feel like this is the goal achieved. Of course, as the season progressed and as we got through the first half of it, and we obviously spent some time at the top of the table, and then we dropped down, and the goal has been for a long time to see if we could finish in the playoff positions. And now that we've done that, that feels like a massive achievement considering all that's gone on. And I feel like we've achieved a massive goal then. So in a sense, I'm quite content with how we've done. And it sounds bizarre to say, but if Cardiff weren't involved in the playoffs and then we fizzled out in the semi-finals, I wouldn't be too devastated, because I feel like we'd have achieved what we set out to achieve. But now Cardiff are in there, and the implications of us facing them or them getting promoted, it seems like we've just inherited a new duty in stopping them. Bizarrely.
Weirdly, this is the 7th time that we've qualified for the playoffs, and it'll be the 3rd time that Cardiff have also been in the playoffs the same year as us, but we've never actually played them, of course, in the previous 2 occasions. And it's I mean, the Swans have a decent playoff record on the whole. We've gone up twice, I'm going to say, through the playoffs. I think I'm right in saying that. Yeah, I think we've won 2 playoff finals. So there is cause for optimism there. But I'm with you, Matt, in many ways, because it feels very different to the last time we were in the playoffs. Last time we were in the playoffs, we finished 3rd. And I think there was a feeling that, yeah, brilliant, we're in the playoffs, but we're in there to win it. We very much felt, I think, that we should be going up to the Premier League. We were good enough to be in the Premier League, and we felt that we were better than the other teams in the playoffs. This time round, I do think it's different. This time round, this is just a free hit, really. It's a bonus that we are here in the first place, because none of us expected to be here anyway. For most of the season, we haven't played like a playoff side. And it's just great, because we've reached it. We've reached the playoffs leaving our best football until the end of the season. We're going into it in some good form. And we're going to be, pretty relaxed, I would imagine, and be able to play with a bit of freedom and confidence, which bodes very well. But it's going to feel very different, I think, to the last time we were in the playoffs, when, I don't know about you two, but I definitely felt more of a not just a desire to get the Premier League, but a feeling that we deserve to be in the Premier League. Whereas now it's like, well, let's just play it and see what happens, and whatever does happen. This has been a fantastic achievement just to get into the top 6 in the first place. I mean, my attitude in terms of looking at the other teams is that it is quite an even field this year. Brentford are the best team, but you don't know how they're going to be affected by missing out on promotion. I think Fulham are my favourites, I'll be honest. I think there are a lot of players there as well that will have also been there 2 years ago when they went up through the playoffs. So they'll have that memory. They've got some very good players. They've been playing better football of late. They've got Mitrovic up front, who can just score. You put one good ball into Mitrovic and he's putting in the back of the net. He's a fantastic striker. I fear for Cardiff, because I fear Cardiff, I should say, not fear for Cardiff. I think they've proven that even if they're not the best team to watch at all times, and even when they're playing badly, Cardiff can snatch a victory, and that's invaluable in the playoffs. They don't need to be playing fantastic football to win games. They will be happy giving a team like Fulham all the possession in the world, parking the bus, and then trying to sucker punch them. Then that'll suit them.
In an odd sense, Guto, just to jump in quickly there, I feel a little bit like I'm glad Mulder's had the last couple of games in Woodman's absence, not just chucked in now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, when he went in against Nottingham Forest, I think he was unsurprisingly, looking a little bit rusty. He hadn't been having any practice. Any second choice goalkeeper would be in that position. But I think we've said in the past, I don't think there are many better second choice goalkeepers in this division. I think we're always feeling pretty reasonably safe then when Mulder does come on, considering he's the second choice keeper. And now that he has actually had 3 games in the side, I mean, he had a very good game against Reading, made some important saves, very nearly saved the penalty as well. Yeah, I'm feeling much more comfortable now. I'm not concerned massively about Mulder. I think he'll have a decent, I'm not like as concerned as I would be if many of our rival second choice keepers were in goals.
We could make a point as well of Mark Gahey in defence as well, who's actually, considering that he started off as shaky as any centre half has started off probably, he's actually become an absolute warrior.
Yeah,
at the back.
I mean, it just goes to show he was always a good player. I just think he was dropped into the deep end when he first arrived here, when he probably wasn't ready yet. Too much of a baptism of fire. He just was not ready. He spent a bit of time out. He's benefited from that break. He's taken his opportunity with both hands, and his performances over the last few weeks, he's been our best defender. And well, it's stunning, really, the turnaround in his form. But we're now truly seeing what a good defender he is. And like we've said earlier on the pod, there are so many players like him in this squad who are just hitting top form at the right time as we enter the playoffs. We're going to wrap up this podcast now with a prediction. We're not going to sort of predict individual games, but just want yes or no from both of you. Are the Swans going to be playing in the playoff final? Steve, we'll start with you.
I can't predict on this one. I honestly just
come on.
I don't know. That's the honest answer.
We never know, but we still give a prediction. Come on.
I'm gonna say no.
Matt.
Yeah. Yes, we are. Yeah, of course we are. We've just stumbled across the golden egg, and we've got players playing on top. Do you know what? Once you get to the 46 games and the 46 games are done, forget everything. All you have to worry about then is momentum, form, attitude, belief. And who's got that? Swansea or Brentford? I ask you that. Swansea have got all of those 4 things. Brentford have just stumbled and are feeling the pain. I think we're getting there.
I'm so tempted to agree with you. I really am. I'm going to probably say we fall just short, but I think whatever happens, I think we'll give it a heck of a good go. But it really could go anyway, though. I mean, it's very difficult to know. The one thing is, I'm pretty confident that I know how the Swans will approach this game, and I'm pretty confident that the Swans will really give it a good go, and that they will not disappoint in any way, shape, or form. The question for me is how Brentford approach this game. If they really bring their A game and bring their best form, I think it's going to be difficult for us. But if they are vulnerable, if they are just still suffering a bit, the door's open, and we it's just up to us to show that we can beat one of the bigger teams in the division and seal the place in Wembley. I mean, we've got so many good players in form at the moment. Who's to say? But I think we're all in agreement, boys, that whatever happens in the playoffs, we can look back at the last month with pride. We finished the season in a very positive manner with a lot of progress. And whatever happens, what we saw on Wednesday night was something that we will never, ever forget. And we will forever be grateful to Steve Cooper and his players for those fantastic memories. We hope that you have enjoyed this podcast as much as we have enjoyed recording it. If I'm being honest, I think we could be here for another 2 hours discussing this, and we would get fed up, but I'm sure you would. But thank you very much for joining us. We did not expect to still be discussing upcoming football matches over the coming weeks, but that is exactly what we will be doing. Keep an eye out on our Twitter page just to see when the next pod will come out, when we will be reacting to the big playoff matches against Brentford. So good luck to the Swans, and who knows, do we have a date with destiny at Wembley awaiting us? We'll just have to wait and find out. Thank you very much for joining us.